Hey everyone, this is Nitro. In this video, I wanted to talk about a certain character's ancestor, the demon waifu, Listell. So, Listell is truly defined by a single skill, which is Blood Dance. And this skill, as of July 30th, 2019, actually has an incorrect description in-game. So that's actually a pretty big error that I think Long Games really needs to fix. But what the skill really should say is, first it deals magic damage, and it deals 0.1 times AoE damage to all enemies within 2 blocks. After taking action, it deals 50% of your hero's hit points as fixed damage, and then reduce your hero's hit points by the same amount. So it does not reduce the enemy hero's current hit points by 50%. It deals 50% of your hero's hit points as fixed damage. What that means is, basically, Listell should be built with maximum hit points as a result. So it really is a major error that in this description, since Blood Dance is her ultimate skill, really. So it's something everyone needs to be aware of. But with the correct description already explained, let's now talk about Listell. So first things first, as with all heroes, let's talk about the required characters for unlocking her bonds. And Listell is kind of interesting in the sense that effectively, she does not need any heroes to unlock her bonds. Her 4th bond actually unlocks from the protagonist Matthew. So you're basically guaranteed to get this 4th bond. As for her 5th bond, the 5th bond increases the hero's attack, int, and skill. So it's actually effectively useless for Listell, given that she's primarily focused on Blood Dance, which does fixed damage. Thus, you don't really need this bond, but for what it's worth, it is unlocked from Langirsser if you want those 45 Trinity crystals. Alright, so with that already covered, let's now talk about Listell's talent. And Listell's talent is quite interesting. The very first thing it does is Listell's intelligence is equal to 1.5 times her magic defense. So theoretically, you want to increase her magic defense as much as possible. Practically, due to Blood Dance, your priority is hit points and not magic defense. Okay. In addition to that, the unit ignores its class disadvantage, so she can actually fight holy units just fine, even though she is a demon unit. And the final effect, the most important one, is that after dealing damage, inflicts Curse of Wounding on the target for 1 turn. Whenever the target is healed, this curse cancels out the healing effect and deals damage equal to a certain percentage of the amount nullified. The percentage starts at 20% at 3 stars, 30% at 4 stars, which is what I currently have. It becomes 40% at 5 stars, and then becomes a 50% damage dealt at 6 stars. So the higher level your Listell, the more damage the enemy takes if they're healed. To be honest, the amount of damage ultimately doesn't matter, because any good player you face in PvP will not be healing their characters when they have the Curse of Wounding on them. So whether your Listell is at 4 stars, 5 stars, or 6 stars does not particularly matter in that sense. It only matters in the sense that the higher star level your Listell is, the more hit points you would have, and therefore the more damage you would do via Blood Dance. Nonetheless, it is a nice effect. You're more interested though in the fact that the curse completely cancels out the healing effect. Okay, so with her talent covered, now let's talk about her classes. And Listell's classes, well, From Blood Banshee, she gets Siphon, which allows her to do single target attack damage, 1.5 times damage, and after battle, she will heal 30% of the damage dealt. So it's a pretty decent skill, even for PvE. Not commonly used in PvP though. Her starting skill is actually a 1-point skill, Demon Guard's Bulwark, and it takes magic damage for adjacent allies. After taking action, if this unit has dealt damage this turn, this skill restores 30% of the unit's max hit points. So it's actually a pretty decent 1-point skill. The problem is she actually has a lot of incredibly good 1-point skills, so it can be hard to pick which one to use. Continuing on. Demon General gives her Demonic Guard. It's a 2-point skill that is like Demon God's Bulwark, which takes magic damage for adjacent allies as a passive, but when it becomes an active, it increases the guard range to 2 blocks, and whenever this unit receives magic damage from 2 blocks away, it performs a counterattack. This effect lasts for 2 turns. The problem with this guard skill is, while it seems theoretically very good, allowing her to counterattack against mages and so on, the problem is that mages generally don't do 2 range strikes, not even in PvE content. They generally start off with an AoE blast, right? And then there's a whole bunch of PvE time rift maps where the enemy has more than 2 range, due to them having a special talent that gives them increased range. Thus, in truth, this skill, despite seemingly very good, is effectively, in my opinion, useless. You should never be taking a 2-range magic attack and in the first place. Like, you should have characters killing off the enemy mages before they can do a 2-range ranged attack on you. So it is what it is. Now, let's talk about Demon God. And Demon God has another useful 1-point skill, Bloody Deluge. And what this does is, when entering battle, this skill reflects 15% of the damage received back to the attacker. And after battle, heals all other allies for a percentage of this hero's max hit points, equals to 50% of the damage reflected. So yeah, I mean, you know, some damage reflections and also some healing for everyone else. It's not bad. I mean, as a 1-point skill, it can definitely be picked. Arguably superior to Demon God's Bulwark, because this one requires you to do damage to the enemy, and that's not guaranteed. So there we go. And then from Demon God as well, the final skill you get from there is Listell's defining skill, Blood Dance, which I already talked about. So the most important thing to note about Blood Dance, I guess, really, is that the range is yourself. So you need to move very close to the enemy in order to affect them with Blood Dance. So that is the one big disadvantage of it, but the fixed damage it deals is potentially huge, and it really makes Listell, while a niche character for PvE, she can be absolutely critical and clutch for any maps where you have to do fixed damage, such as in Timeless Trial, right? There's multiple maps in Timeless Trial where the enemies lose 50% hit points, but they only take fixed damage. So there you go. And in those maps, Listell is by far the best character because she has the highest amount of fixed damage, you know, and she has the mobility to get into range of the enemies to use this skill. Okay, so other than Demon God, let's talk about her other main line. From Bloodmaster, she gets Mind Boar. And Mind Boar is a fairly standard AoE attack skill, right? There's 3 range on it. It has a 3 span, so 3 AoE blast radius, and a cooldown of 3 turns. It does 0.3 times AoE damage, but it does have a pretty nice effect of increasing the enemy's magic damage taken by 20%. So you can use this skill, and then you know, all your other AoE blasts after Listell's will do increased damage. In addition, Mind Boar will apply her Curse of Wounding effect on the enemies, making them unable to heal. So it's actually really one of her top skills as a result, even though the weakness, of course, is getting into range to throw it at the enemies properly. And finally, from Blood Empress, she also gets 2 skills. Another 1-point skill, Last Stand. When unit hit points is lower than 50%, when entering battle, defense and magic defense increase by 10%. Not a very good 1-point skill for her in my opinion. There's better options. And finally, she gets another, I guess, ultimate skill, if you will, Reaper's Touch. It has a range of 4 blocks, so unlike Mind Boar's 3 range, this one does have 4 range. But it's a single target skill. Okay. Directly deals 0.2 times magic damage to a single enemy and adds a debuff. The enemy's healing deals 35% of their healing as damage when used to heal enemy units. It lasts 2 turns, and the most important part about this skill is it cannot be dispelled. So it allows you to, choose a target to massively hinder them from healing, effectively making that target completely killable. The big problem, of course, is it basically does very limited damage, and so I'm personally not a big fan of Reaper's Touch myself. I'd rather run Blood Dance and Mind Boar together. Okay. Now, I should also mention, from her Reaper line, she actually gets one of her best 1-point skills, Seal, which does exactly what Bozel's Seal does, right? When dealing damage to enemies, you have a 50% chance to silence the enemy's active skills, and it lasts 2 turns. So that's why in my case, I currently did put 2 runestones into my Listell, 1 into Bloodmaster to get Mind Boar, 1 into Seal to get that skill. I have not put a runestone into Blood Empress yet, because I don't think these 2 skills are that useful at this time. Although it is important to note that Blood Empress does give her an additional 90 hit points, 10% plus 10 defense, and plus 15% magic defense. And all of these values will be buffed by the percentages that she has. So if you have a runestone to spare, as well as all the advancing materials, which really means you have enough guild medals, by all means upgrade that class as well. I just don't have that. I don't have any of that right now. No guild medals, no advancing materials, no... Well, I do have the runestone, but the runestone is saved for other characters. So I probably won't upgrade Blood Empress anytime soon, because I have already put 2 runestones into my list now, and I don't really want to put another one in it yet. So, with all that covered, her best class really is Demon God, because first, Demon God, as you can see from her wings, it's her flying class. Second, she has 4 movement in her Demon God class, whereas Blood Empress is a land-based character with only 3 movement. So right there, obviously her best class is Demon God. And it should be the final class you leave her in. In terms of skill combos, I've already talked about it. The best one for her is probably Mind Boar, Blood Dance, and Seal. Okay? If you can occasionally swap in depending on the map. Maybe sometimes you might try to use Bloody Deluge instead of Seal. Sometimes you might want to use Demon God's Bulwark, but generally speaking, Seal is by far the best. Being able to silence enemies is huge. Next, then, for PvE, you might occasionally use Listell with her single target strike skill, Siphon. So maybe you'll combo Siphon with Blood Dance, maybe. In all honesty, because she only has a single target strike skill, I generally don't consider Listell a very good single target killer. She's more here to apply AoEs alongside other mages than she is to do single target strikes. But it is available if you for some reason need it. Now, with her skills covered, let's now talk about Listell's soldiers. So, Listell, from her training ground, she gets access to 3 soldiers. The first one is the Undead Knight. The second one is Gargoyles. And the final soldier she gets from the training grounds is the Lava Titan, to burn and do more fixed damage to enemies. Generally speaking, I would say her best soldier in most situations would be the Gargoyle, if you have it at level 10. If you don't have it at level 10, but you already have Vampire Bats at level 10, by all means, use Vampire Bats instead of Gargoyles. The Gargoyle benefit, in all honesty, it's not a massive one compared to Vampire Bats. Certainly, I would not say you must level up Gargoyles as well as Vampire Bats. Okay. So, now, with that said, let's move on to talking about her enchants. Well, I should also talk about her other soldiers, right? Lava Titan you might occasionally use for the fixed damage, and remember, Listell is ultimately a melee character, so occasionally, if mobility and flying is not what you need, you may decide to bring Lava Titans or Stone Colossuses. Okay. Otherwise, but for general purpose, for I guess 99% of the situations, I would say Listell should really be bringing Vampire Bats due to them being flying, which combos very well with her Demon God being flying. And now, let's move on to equipment and enchants. Generally speaking, due to her being almost exclusively focused on using Blood Dance more than anything else, you want to maximize her hit points. And to that end, I would say her best enchant is 2 sets of 2 green enchants. So that way she can get 20% additional hit points as opposed to just 10%. So in my case, I'm currently using 2 Tree of Life enchants and then 2 Steel enchants for the 20% hit point boost. In terms of green enchants, the other green enchant is Thorns, right? And Thorns has a lot of utility for tanks, especially for PvP purposes. So given I have a huge stockpile of Steel enchants, like 43 SSR scrolls and then 289 SR scrolls, as well as a whole bunch of Tree of Life scrolls, that's why I am using those enchants instead. Mind you, I haven't rolled really good enchants yet. So, with all that said, let's now talk about Listell's gear. And my gear is not really her perfect final gear yet, but it's actually quite a solid option. Okay. Surprisingly, Listell is one of those characters that can use SR equipment very effectively, because ultimately you're generally focused on boosting her hit points rather than any other stats. Thus, SR gear is fine. First of all, for weapon, I like to use the flail because it's the only weapon that gives plus 10% hit points. Do note though, it only gives 414 hit points at level 50. By comparison, if you use the usual recommended gear, which is Oath of Justice, that one gives 583 hit points. The problem though is that it doesn't give any hit point boosts. It gives defense and magic defense boosts. Mind you, giving her magic defense boost actually increases her attack. So pros and cons. Whether you choose Oath of Justice or you choose to use a flail is kind of up to you. It depends on how much you think that 10% hit point boost will equal. For example, the way I see it right now is even at 2,340 hit points that my Listell currently has, that 10% is 234 hit points, right? So if you're adding 234 to 414, that right there is 648 hit points, which is already more than the amount that an Oath of Justice will give, right? So that's why I currently chose Flail. That, and I don't have another level 50 Oath of Justice, nor do I have the gold to upgrade an Oath of Justice level 50. Or, for the matter, the Epic Martial Spirits. The other optional SSR item for Listell is her accessory slot, Speed Boots. Because Speed Boots, giving that +1 mobility, increases Listell's flying mobility from 4 tiles to 5. So once again, you're giving up stats, you're giving up some hit points, actually a lot of hit points I should say, but you're gaining the ability to move 5 tiles. So once again, pros and cons that you have to balance out, and it's kind of up to you whether you would do this or not. In terms of enchant values, she really needs to roll maximum hit point boosts, and I haven't really done any rolling yet, once again, because I'm basically broke when it comes to gold. But the flail can get plus 10% hit point boost, so that would be nice. That's an 8% additional hit points. Speed boots, being in the accessory slot, can also get 10% hit points. The other two, the armor slot as well as the helmet slot, can both get 15%. So if you can get that 10, 10, 15, 15, looking at a 50% additional hit point boost just from the enchant values. And then if you can get a second enchant value on those, that would be truly ideal. My personal thought is good luck with that. Alright, so there we go with Listell's enchants. And now, at this point, let's talk about her optimal gear in general. And I'm going to bring up the SSR Gears Google Sheet, created by Black Cat at this time. So just give me a moment to switch over to that. Okay, so here we are. And we'll start off with the weapon. So I've already talked about the weapon. I'm personally using the SR Flail at level 50. Alternatively, you can use the Oath of Justice with 582 hit points to get more defense and magic defense, which does increase Listell's survivability. So it's kind of up to you which one you choose to use. You can also use, of course, the weapons, the staffs, right? But staffs generally don't boost hit points. And you can see they also give less hit points here. So that's why I don't recommend them. Continuing on, armor. So Listell, being a demon class, can actually equip light armor as well as the mage gear. And if you take a look at the armors, well, the highest hit point increasing ones are actually mage gear. So you generally stick with mage gear for the maximum hit points, which means Tenyo's robe, right? 582 hit points plus 10%. The big problem here is Tenyo's robe is really the best in slot item for all healers, mages. It's very hard to have yet another one to give to Listell. So that's just the con side of trying to give her a Tenyo's robe. She can use a Galaxy Cloak just fine, right? It only gives 5% hit point boost as opposed to 10%, but the plus 10% magic defense, she can benefit from it. So it's not exactly a bad item to give her. Other than Galaxy Cloak, she can also use light armor, as I mentioned, and the best one there is Demon Lizard Skin. Do note it's 509 hit points rather than 582, but it still gives the plus 10% hit point boost, and when attacked you do get a 50% chance to apply one random debuff to the enemy. So it is quite nice overall. She has 3 armors which are all quite usable for her. I personally still think Tenyo's robe is her absolute best armor, but it's very hard to have that many Tenyo's robes. In my case, I have 2, but one is equipped on Lana, one is equipped on Liana. I could use more for all the other healers that I have. So this is one of those situations where you may have to make do with other items because you don't have the best one. Next, helmets. And for Listell, the helmet is a no-brainer. Mage helmets all give very, very low hit points in general. You can see here. So you might as well go with the light armor helmets. And in the light armor helmets, there's only one that gives plus 10% hit points, which is Njord's Feathered Crown. So that right there makes it obvious. In addition, when battling against enemies with less hit points, your defense and magic defense are increased by 15%. And she can actually benefit quite well from this effect. So more reason to give Listell a Njord's Feathered Crown. If you don't have one, there's a whole bunch of other items she can use. The red ribbon can be used by her, even though it's not currently released. I should mention that, right? She could even use a King's Crown. Although you lose 5% of the hit point boost, she can use it after all. Same thing with a Loki's Mask. Same thing with a Jormungandr's Eye. None of these are her. I would say none of these in general are her best in slots, but they're all usable, right? In addition to that, from the mage equipment side, if you're willing to give up an additional 72 hit points, right? There's a bunch that give plus 10% hit points, like Tenyo's Headdress, right? The Yggdrasil Reef is another one. So both of these work quite well for her too. But generally speaking, I would say stick with the light armor helmets instead. So last but not least, let's talk about the accessory. Now, I said she can use speed boots quite well, and it is true, but it is not really considered her best helmet or her best accessory. Her absolute best accessory is generally considered to be Blood Pact, simply because of the sheer amount of hit points it gives. 1102 hit points, which is more than double the 509 that all the other accessories would give. In addition, it gives plus 15% hit points, which is absolute insanity. And last but not least, it grants immunity effects as well. Immunity to effects that prevent you from healing or being buffed. So, you know, really, if you have one, by all means, take that one mobility decrease and give her the Blood Pact instead, because it will increase the damage that she deals quite significantly. So, generally speaking, those are the two accessories that you would really give Listell. Blood Pact or else the Speed Boots. Of course, I should also mention, she can theoretically use the Bracer Emblem too, if you have one, because it does give A, 48 defense and 48 magic defense. B, it does increase all stats by 5%, so that includes hit points. It's not the 15% hit point boost of the Blood Pact, but still 5% is 5%. And while it does not give any hit point boost, so no 509 hit point increase, it does grant immunity to fixed damage and to silence. So what that means is enemy Listells can't really hurt your Listell, A, and B, you can't be silenced, so Bozel cannot seal your Listell, or enemy Listells can't seal your Listell. So taking a hit from the enemy Listell with a Bracer Emblem, you can just completely shrug it off and then hit the enemy back with your own Blood Dance. And they would presumably, if they don't have a Bracer Emblem, they're going to get hammered. So those are the three top tier accessories for Listell. And that pretty much concludes my video on how to build Listell. She overall, it's quite straightforward to build her, at least in my opinion. She's primarily there for fixed damage, so Blood Dance, and that means buffing up her hit points as hard as you can. Generally speaking, I would say, while theoretically you could increase her magic defense so that her intelligence stat is high, realistically, that's generally not her role. You don't really need someone to do 1.5 times damage in melee range like that. So that's why I generally don't recommend buffing up her magic defense. Oh, one last thing that I think I completely forgot to mention, and that's her hero boost. So I'll talk about it now. So her hero boost at its beginning stages, it's 5% hit points, 10% defense, 15% magic defense, right? Listell's third bond actually increases, if I can bring it up, one moment. So her third bond increases hit points and magic defense. So the final stats that she ends up buffing as a result would be 30% hit points, 10% attack, because she gives no attack at all otherwise, 20% defense increase, and then 40% magic defense increase. So it's kind of an odd buff in a lot of ways, right? The attack boost is negligible, completely negligible, which means, generally speaking, she's not a very good character at one-shotting enemies, right? Even if she has Siphon, she won't be able to one-shot an enemy unless their soldiers have already been damaged beforehand. So, just something to keep in mind about Listell. Very clearly, her hero boost is very defensive, right? 30% hit points, makes them rather tanky. The odd thing, of course, is she's more tanky against magic attacks due to the 40% magic defense increase than she is against regular melee attacks, with only that 20% increase on the defense there. So, nonetheless, if your Listell is built up with tons of hit points, Even if all the soldiers die and she's taking a lot of damage, she generally survives. Alright, so on that note, I hope you found this video useful on how to build Listell. So yeah, I guess I really think Long Games needs to update the description on Blood Dance because it currently is totally off and would really make people build Listell the wrong way. Alright, so on that note, Nitro out.